WFTS Heather Leigh, who has been covering this trial since the very beginning. Now, Heather, you were in the courtroom today. Give us an update and tell us what happened in the court.
Well, Michael, it felt much more familiar. If you're used to watching, sentencing phases or trials, you're used to seeing these trained professionals, these trained lawyers and public defenders taking the reins and doing what they are, again, trained to do. So it definitely felt much more familiar at this point versus, Ronnie Oneal defending himself. And again, like you said, the judge really urged him to do that because there are not a lot of lawyers and public defenders who are super proficient in death penalty cases. So she was urging him to take their help because of that. And as you can see, they obviously did that. So numerous witnesses were called. The state did get up. They presented their opening arguments as well as the defense. Again, it felt much more familiar. They out of the gate, kind of laid out, all of the things that they were hoping to prove or saying that they would be able to prove. And it almost felt like they were really trying to make up for the last week and a half that they weren't able to stand in and present his arguments.
All right. And how did Ronnie Oneal appear during today's proceedings?
So there were points where Ronnie Oneal was smiling, and this was quite disturbing because I did notice that on many occasions he was smiling and potentially laughing when they were interviewing the medical examiner. It did feel uncomfortable. You're not really sure why he was doing that. And then there was at one point an objection that was made, and he sort of gave this look like, well, of course there's an objection being made, almost as if he feels he's an expert at this point. So that was quite interesting to see.
The author of that story there, Heather Leigh, who has been covering this case since the beginning. Now, Heather, you did it there a little bit in the piece, but can you give us a little bit more of an overview of what happened in court today and how his case might have gone over?
Sure. So, Michael, basically the state called one last witness and then they rested their case. And Ronnie Oneal's witnesses, there were only three, and it really was very quick. It only took 30 minutes to get through all three. There wasn't a whole lot learned, to be honest, through those three witnesses. And then he rested his case, and the jury is now going to be coming back on Monday so that they can get their instructions from the judge.
Now, I know you've been in the courtroom on occasion. What is your sense overall of Mr. Oneal? How has this jury seemed to be responding to him? Because some of the, video that we've been getting, I mean, it just seems outrageous.
It's unlike anything I've ever seen. I have not been in news for decades, but, it really is unlike anything I've ever seen. I know that there's a few other reporters that have been around for a very long time, and they say the same thing. This is definitely a rare and unique situation. I think the jurors have done a really fantastic job of remaining impartial. They've been watching this testimony. They've been listening very intently, and I think that they're going to do a good job when they do go into deliberations. Ronnie Oneal, he has been kind of all over the board. Like you said, you saw those opening statements. He seemed agitated at that point. He was yelling at the jury. He seemed angry. But then as the days went on, he remained calm, cool, and collected. He was not yelling at anybody. In fact, he did a very good job of sticking to witness testimony and, different documents where people had, talked to investigators in this case. So I do think that he has shifted his attitude. Not entirely sure why or when that happened or why that happened, but he is definitely playing his cards a little bit differently right now.
I want to bring now a reporter for WFTS, Heather Leigh, who has been on the scene covering this trial since the beginning. Now, the jury has been pretty active this afternoon, Heather, so tell us about what's going on inside the courtroom.
Sure. So, Michael, they've been in deliberations for about 5 hours now, and they started their deliberations around 2:15. And I can tell you that they really have been doing a good job. They've been sticking to their job, which is to look at the facts, and they've asked a few questions. In fact, They've come back twice now. They've had to come back into the courtroom to ask a question about a technical issue. They couldn't get a video to play. And then this most recent one was something that was said in court that they wanted to look back on in terms of, with the court reporter. There are 12 jurors, 9 men, 3 women, 2 alternates. And something that's really interesting is one of the jurors actually had to be dismissed because of health reasons. And so that one of the alternates was brought in, and another alternate today was told, you're still on standby, you can leave, but you may have to be called back once that penalty phase begins.
All right, just fascinating. All right, now how did the jury receive Oneal's closing argument? Were they engaged? Were they paying attention? I mean, he was screaming. I know you mentioned before that he toned it down during the trial, but again, he went back to that tactic of screaming.
Yeah, Michael, it was so bizarre. It was like a light switched, from the opening statements into cool, calm, and collected, during the whole trial. And then the switch came back on during those closing arguments, and he did become agitated again. Now, this time, the difference here is that he wasn't, showing that necessarily to the jury. He was really fixated on the state prosecutors. He was looking at them in the eye. He was very angry. The judge at one point had to say, listen, this isn't about the state prosecutors. You need to be focused on talking to the jurors because they are the ones that are going to decide your fate.